All right. If the sound of my voice is meeting your ear, then that means this is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. How are we feeling? Are you new to the show today? If so, hi, I'm Jay. Welcome. I sometimes like to talk a little bit here before I get to my guest. Today I'm talking with Jay Marcus and Chris Clark about their book, The Coherence Effect, which I will tell you about in just a bit. If you're here just for them, please go on and just skip ahead. But everyone else, you know the deal. What's up? I don't know where you are, but here in Pennsylvania, the weather has taken a turn for the spring. The numbers are looking good, and our governor has announced that he's lifting restrictions at the end of the month. So among my immediate sphere of people here in my local county, there's a bit of a feeling of we're going to have an okay summer, we're going to get to go out again and see each other again. And everybody's hoping that what's happening in India won't happen here. And it really just remains to be seen. It looks like we've gotten past this second surge or whatever. And I really think it's all going to come down to what things look like in August. That's when the second round of unemployment money that went out is going to dry up for folks, and should be enough months down the road for us to see if the numbers are going to stay down or if they're going to start to go back up again. I will say that on a personal level, I did a much better job this week of setting boundaries around the screens and being way more conscious about what I was putting in my eyeballs and what I was putting in my ears and in my mouth. It's just never been more clear to me how valuable my attention is. Spending all these years in yoga practice, developing sustained attention and the ability to direct attention, and to not be conscious about where I'm placing it, to just go down the rabbit hole that the algorithms have built for us. I don't know how everybody else is doing with their relationship to their digital devices. I don't know what's happening to me if I'm just becoming this old person, but I was at my daughter's viola lesson. I took her to have her viola lesson. She has this lovely teacher. She's really doing a fantastic job. My daughter's becoming a very fine musician, much better than I ever was, and she's 11. But we were in her front room, and the lights were off, and she's got one of those Alexa devices. And she was all, Alexa, turn on the music room lights. And then all the lights went on, and I was like, holy shit. And I know there's a lot of people out there who've got those voice box things, whatever. I'm never getting one of those. Ever. I'm never getting one of those. Seems crazy to me. I don't know. I just feel like there needs to be more separation. There used to be more separation between digital existence and analog existence. So I'm drawing lines. I'm drawing some lines that feel necessary to me. And it's really helped my health. I feel better for setting those boundaries. And that is exactly what today's conversation with Jay Marcus and Chris Clark is about. Jay and Chris, along with their co-author Robert, wrote this book called The Coherence Effect. And it's really about the science and ideas behind the idea of coherence in a human body, and then coherence in the phenomena of life and our interconnectedness to it. They all three are longtime meditators in the Transcendental Meditation School, and they put together a text that looks at research and ideas for how to be well. And it very much purports with a lot of my own experience. There were some things in there that I didn't know, and I very much enjoyed having this opportunity to connect with Jay and Chris, pick their brains some, and I'm glad that you're going to get to hear that today. Real quick before we do, I want to say something to all of the yoga teachers who are listening to this, who are doing some classes on their own, maybe out of your living room, maybe you got a little side space you're working out of, and maybe, you've been doing it by donation, or maybe you've been using Venmo or PayPal, or I don't know what you've been doing, but are you still doing drop-in classes and people paying you per class and having to register every person into every class every time and all the admin that goes into all of that old way of doing it? Well, listen, there's definitely a better way, and it involves doing recurring subscriptions, which everybody's doing and yoga teachers need to be doing as well. And in order to do it, you need an app that will do it for you and still let you be in charge, that you don't outsource the parts of your business that you need to make sure that you're keeping in tabs with. And the way that I do that when it comes to my billing is I use Moonclerk. If you've subscribed to any of my stuff, you've used Moonclerk, and I'm betting it was pretty easy for you on the front end. It's definitely easy for me on the back end, way easier than all of the other billing systems that I've used. And I've used almost all of the other ones before I ended up going to Moonclerk. So if you don't know how to set this stuff up for yourself, you can join my Yoga of Business class, which I'll say something about in just a moment. But if you already got it going on, it's really about just setting things up in a way for yourself where you are freer to live your life. Just like I was saying before about setting boundaries and choosing where you're putting your attention to find more efficient ways of doing your billing just leaves you more room to be the teacher that you want to be. And Moonclerk helped me do that. So I feel very good about working with them. And I want to encourage you to go check it out. And it would be very cool if you make sure to let them know that I sent you. So go check out Moonclerk by going to jbrownyoga.com/Moonclerk. That's jbrownyoga.com/MOONCLERK, jbrownyoga.com/Moonclerk. Now, as I mentioned, if you're not quite sure how to set that kind of thing up for yourself, or maybe you're a little bit hesitant, you're just used to doing it as a drop-in thing, and you're like, why change it? Listen, there's very good reasons to change it. If you want to make a more sustainable situation for yourself that is going to put you on a better trajectory going forward, there are a few things that I've done that have worked for me, even through this pandemic. And we are sharing all of those things in a totally transparent way as like an open source information sharing in the Yoga of Business class that I do every week with my business partner, Josh Citron. If you didn't know about that, I want you to know about that. We'll be happy to help you get your Moonclerk account set up. But just in general, it's a really good place to learn about things like owning your own digital landscape, having a better bliss money balance, and just having some people you can work with to bounce your ideas off. Will help people troubleshoot their websites to get them working better. Will help people figure out their lighting for their video classes. It's the kind of thing that you normally have to pay a lot of money for, but we found a way to offer it to people in a way that's more accessible and affordable. So if you want to find out about the yoga business class or any of my other stuff, the live stream classes that I do, the teacher's class, all my stuff, you can find it at jbrownyoga.com. Lastly, let me not forget to mention that this episode is brought to you in support by Podcast Premium subscribers. People like Valerie Midget and Adriana Lima. We are so grateful to people like Valerie and Adriana for supporting the show by being Podcast Premium subscribers. Not only do they help support this show, but they also get access to the full archives, which now has become quite extensive. So if you've been listening to the show and you appreciate what you hear, maybe you want to listen to some of those old episodes, maybe you just want to make a gesture and give a little support as well, the best way to do that is to become a Podcast Premium subscriber. It's a choose your rate and you can cancel at any time. If you are totally hard up right now, then all you have to do is email us and we will definitely give you a free account. But if you can afford to give something, it definitely helps. And we are so grateful to the people who do that. You can find out more about becoming a Podcast Premium subscriber at jbrownyoga.com. Okay, I think that is just fine. I will touch base with you on the other side. But let's get to this. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Jay Marcus and Chris Clark about the coherence effect. Hello?
Hello. Hi.
Hi, is this Chris?
This is Chris. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Chris. Hold on, Jay's here too. Let me get him in here also.
Okay. I've got the video on. It depending on bandwidth, I may turn it off if I get a slow connection.
I mean, honestly, I'll turn mine on for a second to say hi, hello.
Okay.
I tend to prefer to keep mine off.
Okay.
Not just for bandwidth purposes, but like not just internet bandwidth, but like personal energy bandwidth purposes. Like seeing myself or taking in the visual sort of, I don't know, it takes a lot of my energy. So I kind of like to just be voice to voice like the old days if we were on a phone call. But
radio.
If you like to have it on.
No, radio. Radio.
Yeah, exactly.
Jay is on, isn't he?
Yeah, I'm on.
Well, good to meet you both and have a moment to speak with you today. I am already recording, just so you know. It was wonderful to come across your book, and I'm grateful that you have given me some of your time today. Thank you.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yes, nice to meet you.
Well, for me, the motivation of having you here is an extension of a conversation that's been happening on the show for quite some time. It's usually been framed with these particular like phrases or terminologies. We say going from like a postural, structural, biomechanical model of the body to a biopsychosocial, and sometimes they'll add spiritual model of the body. And I feel like some of that is in what you're writing about as well. But you frame it around this word coherence, which I really like that choice of words. And so I got through most of the book, not all of it, but I skimmed ahead to see where you were going some. And there's a lot there. So I'm excited to get into some of that with you today. I guess before we like jump into all of that, because there's a lot to get into there, I am curious always where the motivation comes from for someone to put this out into the world. And I'm wondering where the two of you and maybe your co-author met and what motivated you to want to write this book together.
Yeah, maybe I'll take that and lead with it, Chris, if that's okay. So,
Sure.
Yeah, we three have collectively practiced the transcendental meditation technique for about 150 years. 50 years for each of us, or thereabouts. And in the course of going to various TM seminars and events, we got to know each other. One way in particular that we got to know each other was that we were all involved in the mid-1980s when Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who's the founder of the Transcendental Meditation Program, decided to bring the Ayurvedic knowledge into the Western world. And so Keith and I, were more administrating that project and on a board of directors of a company that was introducing Ayurvedic treatments and herbal remedies throughout the West. And Chris was one of the principal doctors being trained in the various strategies of Ayurveda, pulse diagnosis. And so, we all had that in common. And Keith and I had written one book earlier about the Transcendental Meditation Program and some of these other strategies from the Vedic knowledge, the Vedic tradition, where Ayurveda comes from. Chris was on a course with Keith and I, and we asked him to become a co-author. We were, halfway through the book at that point. So we all joined up. And I think it's that the three of us individually have gotten so much personal benefit. When you benefit from something, you want to share it with other people. And this whole knowledge, the Vedic tradition, of course, is where yoga comes from, and Ayurveda, and various other aspects of the Vedic knowledge, an agricultural aspect, and a design aspect called Stapachaveda. But we had gotten, so much personal benefit that, we have been sharing it over the years. And, we've probably written 15 books collectively as well. So it's not something new that we came together for this book. We've been doing much the same thing, for many years. My first book was written in 1977. So, I had learned to meditate just a few years before that.
I see. And I guess I'm curious because maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but it seems like you all have backgrounds, or you're not necessarily like hippies or something. I don't know, like, like you have a more like science or academic backgrounds. Am I wrong to assume that?
No, that's right. Keith, of course, Keith Wallace, you could consider him the founding research scientist into the whole field of the effects of meditation on the physiology. He got his PhD from UCLA, and early work published in the journal Nature and Science back in the early 1970s, which sort of really discussed the fact that, when people meditate, it causes a change in the physiology. And so I think that, Maharishi was a scientist too by training, physicist. And, it's one thing to have a subjective experience, but if you can validate that and research that, then in the Western world, of course, there's more credence, but it's also something that you can then report benefits from. I was trained as a physician at Yale Medical School and did my residency training there also in the field of psychiatry, and did do a jumping off point at some point into learning about Ayurveda, went back and practiced psychiatry again, wrote a book with Hari Sharma on Ayurveda and natural healing. So, it's been an integration for the three of us, seeing things from a subjective point of view, from our own level of experience and the benefits on the level of joy and health and happiness and wellness, but then also with the interest to have an objective validation of that. And then, as Jay says, to share that knowledge. You teach yoga, you know how powerful the benefits of yoga are. And we've taught transcendental meditation, the three of us, for each of us have been teachers of that technique for over 50 years. So we've learned it, we've practiced, we've taught it, we've researched it, Keith, in the clinical research setting of laboratories and subjects, myself, and in the clinical setting of patients and their responses to intervention. And Jay has done a lot of research also on the level of society and how it relates to the community.
Well, I mean, all I would say is that I think that, for me, it's always interesting because I do think there's sometimes experiential things that happen in these techniques, these more ancient systems where I can't explain. Like I had Krishna Das on a couple months ago. I can't explain why chanting had this effect on me, but it definitely did. And so it's always intriguing to me when someone who comes from other, like more scientific or academic backgrounds has those experiences. It's very different when a yoga teacher who doesn't have that bona fides wants to talk about the limitations of Western medicine than when somebody who actually knows something about Western medicine speaks about its limitations from that informed place.
Correct. Well, I think that, Jay is the lead author on this book, and he had a very masterful insight. There's so many ways to present TM meditation and its benefits and effects. And, coherence as a term, which is reflected in one of the major research findings of the practice of TM, is brainwave coherence. And that's just a blossoming field of study. And it turns out that the regular practice of TM generates increased amounts of alpha-1 brainwave coherence globally throughout the brain, which is reflected in just more mental clarity, more wakefulness, more productivity. There have been studies done both physiologically, also studies in the workplace showing benefits for people who practice regularly. And so we're excited about this whole way of presenting the benefits of meditation from the scientific and subjective point of view, just with that simple term, coherence.
Well, I would also say, to me, I took a lot more than just TM meditation and how good it is from the book. Like, I felt like there was a very important frame to the book. And I really appreciated even the way that it started with this question of entropy and how, like, if you want to understand health or how to increase your health or have good health, you would first want to have a consideration of death and the process of entropy. And you wrote the second law of thermodynamics. So maybe you'll say, for the people listening, why is the second law of thermodynamics so important in relationship to entropy and coherence?
Maybe I'll go.
Yes, I was thinking it would be you, Jay.
Yes. So, it's very interesting. The second law of thermodynamics is not well appreciated by the public. I mean, it's a scientific term, a scientific concept, yet it is considered really the scientific equivalent of the works of Shakespeare. And it tells us what happens when we die to the body from a scientific perspective. And it tells us that all systems that are not living organisms, anything that is dead, will become more entropic or more disorderly over time. So, a building is not alive. And
I know, sorry to interrupt you, but I have a 1900 Victorian house I bought 4 years ago. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. And it takes a lot. And what you're trying to do to fight and overcome, in part, the entropy that results in all non-living systems, you're trying to maintain as much order as possible. So, the difference between the dead and the living is that living beings, living organisms can all generate coherence. The body is naturally coherent with the immune system, homeostatic systems, with the chemicals that are automatically produced in the body at various times of the day. Melatonin to help us sleep, cortisol to help us wake up, pepsin and hydrochloric acid to help us digest food, and on and on. And all of these things are necessary to be working in a proper order in order to keep the body coherent, and the body does a good job for the most part. But if we can imagine generating more coherence through brainwave coherence, through eating the right foods, through the right kind of exercise that doesn't totally exhaust us, but generates more coherence, through yoga, through better sleep. If we can generate that increased coherence, then you will see people becoming more fully alive, because this is the difference between life and death, the living and the dead. And so that is the overall structure into which this book addresses various strategies that are known either through modern science or modern science in combination with traditional knowledge, the knowledge of traditional ancient systems of medicine known to create coherence. And so, while what we've just been talking about is a little theoretical and philosophical about the difference between the living and dead, what the book is, The Coherence Effect, is primarily a guide or a manual, a detailed manual explaining the systems, the techniques that work and why they work. But it is an intriguing concept. And in general, we can just summarize that the more coherence we can generate, the better off we'll be, the more healthy and alive we'll be. And that when you see somebody who has, what you think of as a great mind, creative, thinks of analogies right on the spot to either answer a judge's question or to show why a sales or marketing program should succeed while another will not succeed. The difference is the coherence that person is generating in his brain. That is the difference between high performance or mediocre performance or low performance in all mental activities. So that's its importance.
Well, I'm. It's interesting that you brought up the performance of it. Maybe we'll come back to that. I'm more interested in sort of just like the health element of it. And I do think that, to your point, like understanding more about things like circadian rhythms, and even you talked about like the rhythmic functioning that happens on a cellular level, which, sounds like a cheesy thing when you say it, but actually there's science there. It's not just like talk. That does kind of make a very strong case for what is sort of, I don't know, it seems like common sense that like positive emotions are related to good health and negative emotions aren't. But it seems like sometimes these days you have to make a case for that, maybe.
No, you're exactly right. Chris, maybe you want to address some of that research on...
Well, I think as you say, the common sense, what seems like common sense is often what seems to be rooted in nature, or the laws of nature, and how the body works, how nature works. And Jay was alluding to the system of natural medicine and Vedic tradition, which is called Ayurvedic medicine. And basically, along the lines of coherence, one of the central themes of Ayurveda is balance. And so we all have our own design of physiology. Nobody is exactly the same as someone else, but we can be grouped according to certain psychophysiological types or mind-body types. And Ayurveda did a great understanding and exploration of really how to do that mind-body typing. And then once you understand, your mind body types and how you fit into the cycles of nature, you understand about, this is the best time for my mind body type to go to bed. This is the best time for my mind body type to exercise, and what type. And just in brief, what Ayurveda does is it sort of analyzes the qualities or aspects of nature, which are 5: air, space, fire, earth, and water. And those have been known in all ancient traditions of natural medicine. And Ayurveda simplifies it and says instead of 5, we'll just take 3. And those 3 are called the dosha types. And the dosha types are, the first is vata, which is air and space. The second type is pitta, which is predominantly the fire element. And the third type is kapha, which is earth and water. Now, vata, which is air, is moving, quick, dry, rough, light. Pitta, which is predominantly fire, is sharp. It's upward moving. It's in the mind, clever and intellect. Kapha, which is the third type, earth and water, is steady and slow, with good stamina and strength and good memory. So all of these have their imprint on our individual biocycle type. And if we know our body type according to Ayurveda, then this is some of the knowledge that we present in the book, is that we can figure out, what diet will create the most balanced or coherent state in the physiology. If I'm a pitta type with a lot of fire, and I find that I tend to get pitta disorders like heartburn or acidity or skin rashes, or have problems or sensitivity with the eyes, or tendency to get annoyed or irritable or angry, then if I know that about myself, if I know I'm a pitta type, then lo and behold, I find that yes, if I eat foods that have too much pitta influence, like chili or salt or hot spices or sour taste, I find that I have more of aggravated pitta in my body and more aggravated disorders related to pitta. Instead, if I have foods that balance out that pitta, then I become more balanced, I become more healthy. So there is this whole theme that we present in the book about coherence and brainwave coherence, and we talk about a lot in terms of how meditation produces that. But we produce coherence through every interaction where we have that ability that we have with nature.
Let me ask you a question for
food and so forth. Yes, go ahead.
I'm wondering, you use the word balance, and that's like finding a kind of a state of balance in yourself. Is there a difference between finding balance and coherence, or are they synonymous?
I think they're again very similar and somewhat synonymous. Ayurveda says that the 3 doshas, when they are balanced, create a sense of contentment, which is health. That's the definition of health. Health in Ayurveda has a positive definition. It's contentment. It's feeling joy and settledness. In the practice of yoga, they say sukham stiram asanam, which is steady, pleasant. The steady pose produces pleasantness.
Stira sukham asanam, yes, the strength and the ease at the same time. Absolutely.
That's right. So it's the pleasantness produced from that steady pose, but it also gets at this whole phenomena that while there is steadiness, there is dynamism going on. So it's not just a state, as Jay says, of inertness. There is a state of coherence producing that's going on even while maintaining that steadiness. That steadiness is the result of like practicing TM. You get this inner silence, and then the inner silence allows the activity to have a foundation for success. It's beautiful. One other thing I'll say is, because you're a teacher of yoga, is the famous expression from the Bhagavad Gita is yoga sta kuru karmani. Established in yoga, perform action. So you're established in union or yoga, which is balance and coherence. And from that level, you can perform action. And similarly, in your practice of yoga, you get in that state of balance. That's the whole.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I tend to think of yoga being in certain ways synonymous with coherence, but I've had a lot of different viewpoints on the show, and not everybody defines yoga in the same way. But I think your point's well taken. I guess the other thing I'm thinking, and it's sort of what the point I made very early on, before we get into these ancient systems a little bit more, maybe, and some of the science there, I am curious because it does seem like there's like these roles for Western medicine to play. Like my wife had an ectopic pregnancy, and if it wasn't for Western medicine, she would be dead. So yes. I'm very grateful for Western medicine.
Of course.
But I think that there are sort of limitations, and there's reasons why Western medicine doesn't always do a very good job when it comes to coherence. And you wrote about that in the book. So maybe you'll say something about that, either you or Jay or both of you.
Well, let me just say something brief. Maybe this is a little bit more Chris's field, but in general, we should appreciate that Western medicine understands very well the coherence principle, that coherence is what heals. If you take pharmaceuticals, or even if you have to have surgery, the purpose of the pharmaceuticals is to create some measure of order where there is a disorder or a disease. The purpose of the surgery is to cut out the disease or the disorder so that what remains is reestablished in that orderliness and the disorder doesn't spread throughout the body. But surgery and pharmaceuticals are not something that we do to get, really healthy. I'm going to go down to the drugstore and buy a couple of $100 worth of pharmaceuticals, so I'll be really, healthy and happy. This is for surgery. Pharmaceuticals are for when we're already sick. And more recently, Western medicine is getting into lifestyle medicine, and they try to implement lifestyle changes first if they can. But here's the thing. We have to appreciate that what really keeps us healthy on a day-to-day basis is what we eat, how we digest our food, whether we get a good night's sleep, the exercise that we engage in, and the relaxation, or in more recent years, the meditation that we do. And so the reason why the healthcare statistics in this country are so poor, 40% of all Americans have chronic, generally incurable diseases. The reason why it's so poor, despite having the most expensive healthcare system in the world, is because we don't apply the coherence principle to these everyday things that keep us healthy: eating, digesting, exercise, meditation. We select the meditation because, our friend does it. But is it a meditation that produces coherence in the brain? And the reason that's important for health as well as mental performance is because the brain is the control center of the body. So if you make the brain coherent, it will tend to make everything in the body coherent. There's a general systemic effect that comes from making the brain function in a more orderly or coherent way.
I think from the medical point of view, generally speaking, that, doctors who see patients are overwhelmed just with the complaints and disorders that the patient presents. And as Jay's saying, that there's very little opportunity or time for doctors to actually promote lifestyle medicine or preventive medicine or promote well-being. So I think, Jay and I and Keith have written this book as an effort to promote the knowledge of how to achieve well-being, prevention, coherence. And you doing your podcast and a lot of other practitioners who really are into improving health. And that's what we want to do, is we want to get to a state where diseases aren't cropping up so much, that we're in a state of active preventive medicine. We're in a state of active production of well-being and less stress, less cortisol dysfunction, less elevated blood sugar, more being in tune with our innate needs and desires so that we eat what's healthy for us. We get the proper sleep, as Jay's saying. So yes, it's Western medicine's overwhelmed.
Yes, amen to all the things that you're saying. I want to bring up something that you wrote in the book that I thought was an important point, because something that happened to me, which is that even after you embrace like a more holistic worldview and you make coherence more of a goal in your life, like just because it's like a natural or alternative strategy doesn't mean it will work. Like you can like take what would normally be a very natural good thing and totally overdo it, or it might not be the right thing for you. That it's not a matter of it being like a natural thing or like a Western medicine thing. It's about it being the right thing.
Right. One size doesn't fit all. You have to know your physiology. You have to know who you are. Know thyself.
So, even in yoga, for example, while all the body positions, all the asanas are good and are good for different parts of the body, they have to be done in a certain way, we believe. And knowing your body type also helps. If you
are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of Jay Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.